It is Ryan Seacrest here. Everybody needs some variety in life. That's what I love about Chumba Casino. They know how to keep things fresh and exciting. All their games are free to play. Like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire. You can claim free daily login bonuses, too. And they release new games every week. So spice things up with ChumbaCasino.com now for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
Ladies and gentlemen! Welcome to the main event! This is Cinesmack! And the winner is...
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome to bout number 156 of Cinesmack, the podcast about films by filmmakers. I am your host, Mike Keeler. Joining me tonight is our panel of award-winning judges. First, writer, actor, and director Kyle, I don't know gold dust from diarrhea fine.
Oh boy, I hope no one chokes me and puts me in a box. I would hate that. Don't have a party around my body. I would hate that. Really, I'm psyched.
Second, filmmaker and owner of One Genome Short Productions, Gabriel, do you know, when I was a girl, I used to read quite a bit Rowold.
I never strangled a chicken in my life.
Third, filmmaker and owner of
Or choked
Arizona,
one either.
owner of Arizona Ink Studios, Andrew, on what, $43 and a smile and bullshit, Zumwalt.
Sorry. I do approve of murder. Think of the problems it would solve. Unemployment, poverty, standing in line for theater tickets.
Fourth, filmmaker and owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Tom, you're quite a good chicken strangler, as I recall. Haggis.
You know, the power to kill can be just as satisfying as the power to create. But then again, that guy didn't have a podcast.
All right. Welcome, gentlemen. Welcome back. This is our, fourth show of the year, technically? Well, third of the new year, fourth of our season. Anyway, let's poke the monkey, find out what we're talking about this month.
Ladies and gentlemen, black and white baddies and murder mystery maestros, welcome to the main event. Tonight, two tales of true crime try to tingle your spine. Will In Cold Blood be a true crime top dog? Or will Rope wrangle a win? In the first quarter, from 1967, written by Truman Capote and Richard Brooks, directed by Richard Brooks, starring John Forsythe, Scott Wilson, and Robert Black. In Cold Blood. In the second quarter, from 1948, written by Hugh Cronin, Patrick Hamilton, and Arthur Lawrence, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, starring Farley Granger, John Dahl, and James Stewart Rope.
All right, without further ado, let's move on to our first round, which is writing.
Writing. Okay, let's begin. Let's start with In Cold Blood, based on a true story of some murders that happened in Kansas, based on a famous book by Truman Capote, which you can see in Mike's wonderful profile picture tonight. I have not read the source material for this, don't know a lot about the actual crime. This obviously plays with kind of the truth of the crime a bit. I would assume there are a lot of choices made for a lot of poetic license taken, let's put it that way, to tell the story. It's an interesting tale about two people who kind of kill. I understand the title In Cold Blood. They kill for a reason that's not real. They seem primed to do it. It's sort of an exploration of the minds of these two characters. One being a very kind of smooth talking con man who purports to have like strong family values and ties to his family, but continues to do really sleazy things. It's actually funny because the way the movie is written, you start out thinking one character is really the big bad villain of the group, and in the end becomes a little more sympathetic towards that character that you thought was the worst of the lot, and you start to feel more and more like there was some advantage, people being taken advantage of. It has a satisfying ending and a neat little police procedural inside of it. It's very interesting how they find the clues that eventually lead them to the killers, especially going back. This is a movie made in the 60s about a crime committed even earlier. So I really enjoyed that part of the movie. Some of the little meetups and things that happen along the way are interesting. It's kind of always interesting to peek into these characters on their travels. But the pacing of it is a little all over the place. I do like that they eventually go back. I like the narrative structure of starting with everything taking place, seeing the aftermath, and then eventually going back to actually kind of see what really happened. So I like the structure, and overall, I thought it was a pretty well-written film. Now, Rope is a movie that I watched during my kind of more film snobby days, when it was like put to me as this incredible movie full of long one takes done at a time when the technology was so prohibitive of that. These huge cameras, and you had to have sets being moved and things like that. And lots of quick changes out, and you had to hide cuts and had to hide changing the camera and things like that. So I was kind of watching the movie the first time for that. This time rewatching, and I really was watching it for the story of it. And the story is a little thin. It's a lot about someone, basically a sociopath or someone with psychopathic tendencies, being swayed by a powerful person to, or I guess an influential person in their life, to commit some crime to prove they're superior. And they wrangle someone else in this who doesn't have the nerve or the steel to be their co-conspirator. And then the idea behind the movie of this, like, basically thrill killing and killing for the sake of murder and to prove you're superior, and then having people over for a party to kind of bask in the afterglow is an interesting twist on a true crime story. I know it's based on an earlier play, and I'll put this out there, and this is where I'm going to leave it. I thought this the first time I saw the movie, and I thought it again after watching it, and I want to hear what you guys think. I think Rope would be a much stronger film and a much better script had they left out showing the killing in the beginning of the movie. If you started with them preparing for the party and things being off and seeming strange and not knowing why, and having them make a lot of excuses to move things into the firm, and start with the sort of mystery of what just happened. I think by giving away the game so early, you take a lot of punch out of the ending. because you've already seen the act that's committed and you know what the stakes are. So that's my opinion. I really want to hear what you guys think about that.
I don't know. I kind of, I don't know. I mean, I guess it kind of would ratchet up the tension. As Jimmer Stewart's going towards the chest, that, is he in there? Is he not in there? I mean, I guess knowing that he's in the chest makes the entire party that much more tense when anybody gets within, range of it. But I mean, it's an interesting idea, I suppose. I think I agree with you. I think what I like is the story structure in Cold Blood, and it's kind of the same thing you're saying here too. Is if by taking the murders and putting them at the end, I hadn't seen it and I didn't really know I knew the topic and the Truman Capote book, but I didn't know really how how the story was going to be told in the movie because I hadn't seen it before. But I thought the putting the murder at the end, and or kind of sandwiching it basically between the trial and the manhunt, was an interesting choice. And I don't know if the book is structured that way, but I've been thinking about it the last couple of days, and I'm not really sure there's another order you could tell it, because if you told it in chronologically, I think it loses a lot of its punch. So I don't know. I thought that it was, it's a really well-crafted story, and I'm interested to know it. I don't know, because the crime procedural TV shows that we have, the CSI and NCIS, I mean, they're everywhere. Law and Order. It did In Cold Blood fill that same kind of desire for people to kind of see behind the scenes of crime and, the process of catching a killer and that kind of thing. And is that one reason why this movie and the book are so significant? Because it kind of started that that popular, I don't know, tendency for people to kind of get wrapped up in that stuff, those TV shows and those movies and those books. And I'm curious to know if this is kind of where it started. But that's what it felt like, is that the people that watched this back then are similar to the people that watch those shows now.
I would agree. Sorry, Gabe, did I just cut you off?
Nope, go ahead.
I guess so. We actually had to read In Cold Blood, and then watch the movie. So, which yeah. So that was. It was, and let me preface this. This was a late high school, which I thought was very odd, based on, obviously the content of both the story and the movie. But we were going through stuff about, books versus movies. I would say that I felt the book was better written, but well adapted for the screen. Interesting take on the accounts of the murders kind of at the end, in between. That was at least the way the book gives it away is when they're actually doing their semi-confessions, and they really get into it and then get into the press and all that stuff. I think it's, I don't know. Tom, this is the thing with like the true crime kind of movies, because this is based on a true story. And I mean, there is some fictional things with it, but Truman Capote, he got really interested into this whole story years later, when hardly anybody really knew much about it, and it became kind of this big thing later. And I'd be interesting to see some of his notes and the way that he went about actually paring out the story, and how those got blossomed into the movie, because they picked some interesting choices, and it felt more of like what we would see as a traditional CSI type show today. It feels very cliche true crime. Is that a bad thing? And maybe, this was one of the first that started that trope. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't alive when the movie came out, so.
Well, I don't know. You had Dragnet and Perry Mason, and
But were they this deep of a story though? Like
those I don't think those were, but I'll do some searching.
Okay. As to Rope, one thing I did find I've seen Rope many times, college, film school, and all that stuff. They showed Rope, Alfred Hitchcock, blah, blah, blah. What I found interesting was Rope is also based on a true story, which I think is interesting. And there was so much speculation on the writing that the pair they were homosexuals. And then there was a big throw of, no, they weren't. And then it came out later that they were. And in real life, they actually were. And so it's a really interesting way to play out showing what they did and then having that suspense that the audience is in on the crime. And Alfred Hitchcock has a way of writing the story so that the audience is kind of like it's there. He's in the chest. He's in the chest. and it's that I don't think you would pull off the same type of suspense if you were to not know that the murder had already happened, because the audience would be like, okay, they're acting weird. Something's going on. Did they do something? Whereas otherwise you're now sitting in the room with them, hoping that somebody doesn't do something stupid like open the chest or see something, and it puts you into that moment of, are they going to get away with it? Are you building that suspense with them? You're getting into that sweaty moment of, are they going to get caught? And so I think that pulls you into the story a little bit more, because now you're a player in that apartment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I thought that, okay, first of all, were these loosely based on true stories?
Rope is very loosely based.
Rope is loosely based, but in Cold Blood is pretty.
Cold Blood is Blood is not.
Yeah. I thought we also have talked about this too, the length of movies, and I maybe the previous podcast I was like, well, movies are getting really too long. Can we really stand 3-hour movies every time we go to the cinema? But I actually thought that Rope was maybe a little bit too terse. It was maybe a little bit short in a way, because it felt to me, I liked it. I liked the writing. I liked the dialogue in particular. I thought it was kind of interesting. Its delivery we can talk about during the acting category, but I thought the dialogue was interesting. But I also felt that Jimmy Stewart's character kind of figured out that there was something off a little bit too quickly. It's like it was almost like he knew before he got there that something was kind of odd. And maybe you could make the argument that because, he knew them and knew what their kind of philosophies were on things. But I felt like it was maybe in some ways it was a little bit too terse, a little bit too quick for these things to happen. I have not read the book In Cold Blood. I'd never seen the movie before. But I was very pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it much more than I thought I would, and again, I think one of my favorite parts of the writing was the dialogue. I think the dialogue was really done well and was representative and revealing of the characters in the story. So I thought the writing on both of these was actually pretty outstanding. But again, like I said, maybe some of the delivery of this dialogue we might discuss a little bit more in the next category.
Well, and when you say dialogue, one of the things I always thought that I've liked about Rope is all of the killing puns. that they throw in with all the dialogue. Oh yeah, we killed, you killed two birds with one stone there. And just all the off-cut slang and different, phrases that people would throw. Yes. And I thought
little hints. Yeah.
I've always thought that was cute.
Yes. It is well written. It's very I don't know. I don't know the right word. I want to say catchy, but that's not the right word. But it's
punny?
Really well. It is punny.
It's clever. It's witty.
It
is
clever.
Clever. That's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. Clever.
Boy, that was ironic. You couldn't think of the word clever.
Don't you think?
I'll be here all night, kids.
All right. Time's up. So just to let you know what was on TV in the 60s, we had Ironside, Columbo, the FBI, The Fugitive, Hawaii Five-0, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Untouchables, and Mannix, but my favorite that comes up as true crime TV shows from the 60s, Batman.
True crime.
All those were true. The Penguin is real.
Yeah.
The Joker is real.
Hold on. So that means bat shark repellent is canon.
That's
a real thing.
That's right.
That exists.
So my guess is, well, I think if I remember right, Perry Mason, I think, used to say that they had taken real court documents, changed the names. Yep. And so I'm guessing they took liberties with some stuff, like especially Ironside, Columbo type stuff, and Mannix maybe. But what I'm trying to say is censorship, or not, let's call it censorship of TV in the 60s was way different than it is now.
Yep.
Right? Because you had the big three, and that was it. Mm-hmm. And then now, even before the streaming wars, you had HBO doing fantastic TV shows. So everyone started to step up their game.
Yeah,
well,
I guess
In Cold Blood is about a violent topic, but it's not necessarily a super violent movie.
Correct.
You don't see a ton of blood and gore.
Correct.
No.
And you see very little of the actual crimes. There's more a feeling of menace.
Yes. And you also have to remember, too, they probably did a lot of miniseries around true crime stuff, I'm guessing.
But I would bet that in the 60s, it was still a pretty, it's still a pretty heavy topic of this basically murdering an entire family in their house while they slept. Correct. That's not something that I would have guessed you would have seen on Columbo in the 60s.
No.
So that's what I'm saying is, like, for the 60s, I think this is a pretty heavy.
It is, but you could do
visceral movie. Right. Let's say that.
Yeah, you could do more in movies and film. All right, let's put it to a vote. Start with Kyle.
Despite my problems with the first act, I really did like the dialogue in Rope. I'm going to go for Rope.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Rope, too, for the, just the dialogue and the kind of the philosophy of murder they tackle.
Andrew?
Puns for the win. And witty banter goes to Rope. Clever.
And Gabe.
I thought both were very well written. I'm also going to go with Rope, however.
Oh, wow. This is surprising for me. Paul Stewart's character of Jensen the reporter does not feature in the book of In Cold Blood. The character was an addition to add an element of Greek chorus, something that Truman Capote later claimed did not make any sense. Then again, Capote took himself out of the book completely. So any film based on that book would not have him as a writer. So Paul Stewart's ambiguous writer was added. Screenwriter Arthur Lawrence claimed that originally Sir Alfred Hitchcock assured him that Rope would not show the opening murder, therefore creating doubt as to whether the two leading characters actually committed murder and whether the trunk had a corpse inside.
There you go, Kyle.
Yep.
I think that's
Bingo.
And also, Kyle, you referenced my picture for the Twitch stream that we're showing right now. That's actually Philip Seymour Hoffman as Truman Capote.
Yeah, isn't that what I said?
No, I think you just said Truman Capote. I just want to make sure you knew that was was Philip Seymour Hoffman.
No, that's definitely the real Truman Capote. Right? He just looks a lot like Philip Seymour.
He looks a lot like Seymour Hoffman. Wow.
Oh man, that movie. I really liked that movie. I remember going to see it at the Fleur. Anyway, off topic, off subject. Let's move on to our second round, which is acting.
All right. I think this is me. So, like I said before, this is the first time I'd seen In Cold Blood. And I am not a big fan of the murder procedurals. I mean, I know that the world's full of violent crime, but I don't really need to watch like actors and screenwriters like tell it again. I think what kind of fascinated me about In Cold Blood was kind of what we talked about for like where the country was at the time when it came out. 1967 was kind of a tumultuous time in their country anyway. And barriers were breaking down and censorship was changing and people were able to, see more, as we kind of discussed already. So that being said, I think the acting, Robert Blake was particularly very good in Cold Blood, and but I think kind of the strength of In Cold Blood it's in the secondary characters, but the Robert Blake and who was the other guy? Scott Wilson, Dick and Perry, yeah. Yes, so I think sometimes when you go back and we watch these movies in the late 60s and the early 70s, there's this style of acting that, whether they're theater actors that have moved over to film or, it's kind of this, acting has evolved a lot in the last 50 years. And I think sometimes that throws me out of these movies. But for some reason in Cold Blood, there was something very natural about the way the two of them acted and came across. And it didn't feel like it was like a movie from the late 60s. But on the other hand, with Rope, I feel, even though I just said that, I think Rope has much stronger acting performances. Jimmy Stewart is just amazing, and I'm sure we'll talk about him some more. I think he's really great in this. I think the contemplation and working out exactly the crime, and he can kind of see it on his face, and something that he's always done is I always felt like Jimmy Stewart did his best acting when he wasn't talking. And it's not often that Jimmy Stewart gets upstaged, but Farley Granger, who played Philip in Rope, absolutely blew me away. He was so smooth and so calm, but watching him slowly become unhinged as his partner started to let more and more slip and things started to go wrong and his so-called perfect plan started to be not so perfect. I loved watching Farley Granger in this. And the first time I saw Rope, like a lot of you back in film school, it was the gimmick of the one shot, which I'm sure we'll talk in the next category, and Jimmy Stewart and Granger didn't really connect with me. I didn't even remember him that much from this movie, but walking away from it now, I think it's one of the best performances Hitchcock has gotten out of somebody. It was really, really quite amazing. So.
Yeah, I think, Jimmy Stewart is one of those people who just has this kind of innate charisma that you see him on screen and you like him immediately. He's just engaging. and I thought he was really excellent in Rope as well. And I think that's his first collaboration with Hitchcock, if I'm not mistaken. And he's been in some other really excellent Hitchcock films. And he's just I don't know what it is. I kind of wish we had Sam here so Sam could do his impersonation of Jimmy Stewart. But I did also feel like he wasn't like what we think of as the kind of almost kind of stammering, stuttering version of Jimmy Stewart that we're kind of used to, that Sam used to kind of impersonate for it. He was much smoother and very, very enigmatic. He was fun to watch. And Farley Granger, I agree, was also very good. And it was really interesting to see his mood shift so much throughout the course of it. You could tell there were times he was just full of joy or full of himself, so happy that he's gotten away with this, but then he was also at times really enamored with Jimmy Stewart's character, his mentor, and kind of and you could tell he was almost like a little kid at times when he would interact with him, and then other times he was this condescending douchebag to some of the guests and that kind of thing, and it was really interesting to watch his mood and his demeanor change over time in the movie, and I think that's a sign of a really great performance. One of the things, though, I felt is that, and I think you kind of mentioned this, Tom, is that like earlier films, the acting was a little bit different, and we're not used to it, and in some ways it feels kind of stilted, kind of wooden, and almost very stage-like. And I think it has evolved significantly since then. But then, we also have to take into account that this was actually it was based on a stage play. It was kind of the original thought during the production of it was, we're going to try to basically film a stage play in one take for a movie. And so in a way, the performances were they were more stage-like than film-like, if you know what I mean. They weren't quite as subtle as what we're used to today. I thought the performances in Cold Blood were really great too. Robert Blake, was he typecast for this? Maybe, I don't know. He was very genuine though, and I thought he did a really great job. And he had some subtleties to it, to his performance that were really very impressive and meaningful. And so I thought his performance was good. It was funny. I did not recognize Scott Wilson. I've seen Scott Wilson in various other movies and TV shows, and I did not recognize him. And I was doing a little kind of, research while I was watching the movie, and I was like, oh my God. But once I knew who it was, it's like, oh, I see it now. It's totally him. And he was pretty good too. So I think, again, I think sometimes these things get a little bit lopsided in the voting, but the writing, I think, was good for both of these, and I think the acting performances overall in both of these movies were pretty strong.
Yeah, I'm sort of the opinion in acting kind of the same way I am in sports, and that it's hard to say now that people are not more skilled in general at it. So like the average level of athleticism and things like that in sports today is much, much higher than the average level was 20 years ago. We could argue who was the best of all time till we're blue in the face. But even if you look at like younger and younger kids getting taller, bigger, faster, stronger, I think in that way, acting has also advanced a great deal. There have been a lot of changes in philosophy, and there have been a lot of changes in directing and delivering lines, and it's night and day sometimes watching these old films. Rope being from the 40s, and Cold Blood being from the 60s. And for a 60s movie, In Cold Blood was very naturalistic very heightened at times, very nuanced at times. I thought they got great performances out of both lead actors. I thought, even some of the side actors were fairly good. I loved the sort of detectives and cops. I thought they played very to type on that. They were very good. Rope, it's that sort of acting that, it's very stage, it's very loud, it's very to audience, even though you're being filmed in a small place. And you can see among some of the older cast, particularly some people in this movie, been around long enough to have spent most of their career in silent films. Like my avatar, Mrs. Atwater, who my wife could not stand, has such an old-timey of a time performance that is so recognizable and stereotypical of an actor from a certain era that it kind of creates the mold for how people acted in the time. Jimmy Stewart, a lot more naturalistic, and obviously I think just a much higher caliber actor. I agree with you guys about was it Philip or was it Brandon who we're talking about? I thought Brandon was like the cool psychopath one. But either way,
that's Philip is the.
Philip? Oh, okay.
I think so. Yeah, and Brandon is the accomplice who's a little bit
okay
nervous.
Brandon is the cool guy. That's John Dahl.
Oh, so what
are they? Oh, did I have them backwards?
So
yeah,
regardless, very different performances they got out of both of them. I agree with what you're saying.
Oh,
about,
you're right.
Farley Granger. He is.
I guess I was probably talking about John Dahl actually in that case.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure I had him straight because I could have been backwards.
Their photos on IMDb are misleading.
He plays a very kind of what you would see as, I think, like a typical sort of psychopath. He even can't avoid meddling in the romantic relationship of other people in his life, even though he's just committed this heinous act, and he almost has to show off and glorify what he's done. I think there are times where he almost wants to get caught. He wants Jimmy Stewart to see how he has evolved to be this person capable and that's permitted to do these things. But in typical way, like his narcissism is his undoing, where he can't keep his mouth shut. He can't stop gloating. He can't stop drawing attention to himself. But at other times, he's very cool and calm and collected and really shows a lack of emotion, which I think is kind of a very forward-thinking sort of understanding of what a psychopath or sociopath would be like. His accomplice starts off, a little rattled and gets worse and worse as the night goes on. And I think he's sort of acting in a different world in a way. He's got a different style that doesn't have that. They don't quite mesh. I think they play well together because of the conflict. But just kind of different styles. And then you bring in Mrs. Atwater, and she's screaming to the balconies while it looks like she's obviously reading cue cards off the side of the camera, which I thought was hilarious. But interesting films. Some really good performances in here. Very surprised by In Cold Blood and how much I enjoyed the performances. I know it's kind of been lauded for having good acting in it. I do think Robert Blake played on the edge a few times of being a little too wacky and a little too out of it. But as you saw more and more of, his formative years and the things he'd gone through, it kind of started to make more and more sense. And in the same way, Scott Wilson started just sort of being a charming, not really lovable, but like a scamp or a kind of a little con artist. And his true colors start showing through, and he gets more and more despicable and evil and hateable towards the movie. So I think they show their range and their growth of their characters very well. Just gotta make sure when you're doing a movie, don't let a stage actor just scream at people standing right next to them.
Okay, Kyle, you should have done acting.
Oh,
this should have been your category, man. You're like, shit. I got the guys' names wrong, so good job.
Does anybody else think this might be a writing thing?
I was
kind of like, Brandon is a weird name to hear in a 1940s movie.
Brandon
It just
Shaw.
sounds too modern. Like, I went to school in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was full of Brandons.
Full of Brandons. Yep.
Right. But nobody's dad was named Brandon. Nobody's grandpa was named Brandon. So this is just strange. Like, really? His name's Brandon?
Brandon Shaw.
Kind of threw me off.
Yeah. The only addition I was going to add to Rope was I felt that James Stewart and John Dahl, they really played well off of each other. They had the same slick demeanor to them, the very likable character, but you knew that the character that John is playing, Brandon Shaw, is there. He's the snake in the grass. He's that car salesman that you come in, you're like, he's super likable and he's whimsical and nice, but inside he's got this really darkness to him. And I think that shows off really well. And the two of them sparring is probably some of my very favorite dialogue, especially when they first start talking about murder on the couch. And that whole rhetoric that they talk about back and forth is just gorgeous. It plays so well, and they do it in such this mannerism that is just so, it's almost likable, and yet you know it's despicable at the same time. And it's very beautiful. In Cold Blood, I would say that the one thing I really like, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next round, is right before the execution. And that whole scene where they're trying to get him to sign the confession, and he's walking in the prison and he has to go to the bathroom. And then it's this, he shows this whole emotional buildup, whereas his actual person in crime who actually did the murders is just like, okay, cool, I'm gonna die, gonna go to a better place, suck it. And it's just a very fascinating contrast that I believe came across very well on screen. At least to me it did.
All right,
okay,
let's put it to a vote. Tom.
I gotta give it to Rope.
Wow. All right. Andrew.
I have to give it to Rope.
Gabe.
Man, these are actually tough. And again, like I mentioned before, I think it's going to be more lopsided than it really is. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Rope as well.
Okay, Kyle.
Very hard to vote against Jimmy Stewart, but I am going to go with In Cold Blood.
He's doing it just to be nice. He doesn't really mean it.
Hey, Kyle. Danny Boyle just gave you a thumbs up. He's good.
He's happy.
Oh, thanks.
He's opening his champagne like the Miami Dolphins.
She gets drunk every month.
Yeah. He only opens it though once another movie takes a hit. So,
how many Dom Perignon cases do you have in your basement from Danny Boyle for defending his honor?
Well, you can see him right behind him.
Oh yes, you're right. You do very pretentiously broadcast from your wine cellar.
Yes.
I do. But my wine cellar is where I tell my kids to go when they start bitching about something.
So is this kind of like every time somebody votes for him, something gets its wings? Is that?
No. Yeah.
See what I did there?
Jimmy Stewart
Well done.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you. Rough crowd tonight.
Screenwriter Arthur Lawrence claims that the actress that played the maid in Rope was treated like one by the actors and actresses while shooting.
Oh boy.
Treated like what?
Treated like an actual maid.
Oh, I understand now. That's awful.
That is awful. Intending to give In Cold Blood a documentary-like feel, Richard Brooks deliberately chose non-movie star actors. This was very much counter to what Columbia wanted. They were hoping to cast Paul Newman and Steve McQueen as the killers. Brooks later commented, "I love Paul, but that's a problem. Everyone loves Paul. He's not scary." So Nearly 500 actors were seen for the parts of the killers before Scott Wilson and Robert Blake were cast. 500. That's a lot.
That's a long ass day, a lot of donuts, and a bunch of coffee.
Yep. All right. Third round. Directing.
Jeez. That's a bell in itself. Okay, let's I wasn't 100% prepared for directing, but I can definitely talk about our good friend Sir Alfred Hitchcock. But we're going to talk about Richard Brooks first. So I found it very interesting that Mr. Brooks, not that Brooks, I'll just call him Richard Brooks because otherwise people think he's Mel Brooks. But Richard Brooks, he actually served in World War II, which I think is very fascinating because Sir Alfred Hitchcock also did work in World War II. And I find that he did some very interesting choices in his film for cinematography and moments in the scene. We've cut a little bit about them where we talked about how they didn't really show the crime until the very end, more as a flashback. And in fact, there was another moment of a flashback where he's sitting in the hotel room and he's thinking back as a kid, and that whole sequence. So Brooks was kind of deemed by the movie making industry as an independent. He kind of just did his own thing, and he went kind of against the grain of what the studios wanted. So it's interesting to see the film as we do today through our eyes, because it feels like a normal crime drama that we would see. I feel like in the 60s, this was a little more of a terror. And the way that he intertwines the stories is very reminiscent of the way the book did it. And he did a good job crossing that over. So he was going in and out between the family, through the killers, through the investigation, and you're kind of pivoting these moments during the manhunt. And I felt that those were good choices to get that kind of tonal feel that all this other stuff was going on in the background. And yet these two guys, all they were trying to do is get away and get through to Mexico. And they got caught because of a stolen car. And it's so fascinating the way that he brought all of that together, and it was coherent. Because a lot of times you'll see this in film and they don't do a good job of it. You get lost. You're watching and you're like, wait, are these guys? Wait, where are these guys at? So I felt that there was a really good direction in how that was put together. And that might partially be, we talk a little bit about editing to the editor. But he also got some really scary, maybe is a good word, intense, maybe is a good word, performances out of our killers. Again, one of the big ones I talked about the last round was at the very end, just the remorse, the scaredness, the brokenness versus the very callous, I don't care moment. Just really, it was very well delivered. And I hope to believe that it wasn't just the actors and that Richard got those kind of moments out of the actors based on his directing ability. I mean, I want to talk more about the film themselves than actually him, but I mean, Richard Brooks has done a lot of really cool stuff. Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. The brothers Karamazov, I can never say it. The brothers Karamazov, and he's got Oscar nominations. He's done a lot of stuff, but he's always been kind of the outsider, which I find very, very interesting, especially for an Oscar-nominated director. We'll jump to Sir Alfred Hitchcock. People refer to him as the godfather of thriller, the godfather that builds that suspense of horror where it's not just necessarily blood and guts. It's that we're trying to get you up to that moment. You're trying to get the audience to be like, oh, and he's really, really good at it. And during this movie, he did what they consider a single shot for the film, even though it really wasn't. There are cuts to hide where the actual cuts were. They could only film for 10 minutes. That's how much film they had. And so he was very, very picky about where cameras were and where they actually would move and how long they would run for. So that way he could perfectly splice everything together. And then on top of that, Alfred Hitchcock also had figured out that the projectionist would run about a 20-minute reel before he had to switch the reels on the projector. So he also based some of the cuts and the way that the wipes go directly on that. So what's weird about all of this, we look at this now and we're like, yeah, that's the one take. We've seen it. They hadn't seen really anything like this. Like he envisioned how to do these and made these things. And even Jimmy Stewart, when he was on set, was like, I don't get it. Like it was such a waste. And all we did was practice camera movements because they built this set on moving walls, and they had people that would run in and move furniture out of the way. And then when the camera would come back, they would put the furniture back in the exact same spot. And he had choreographed basically the crew more than he had worked on with the cast. And there were some people that felt that they were just standing around doing nothing, and they were the actors instead of the crew. So I thought it was really interesting that he was building this technique and he was doing these kind of experimental things while trying to shoot this. So yeah, I'm going to stop there. I could gush about Sir Hitchcock for quite a while. I really enjoy his films. I've studied him a lot. I will say that Hitchcock was actually also in World War II. He actually did a documentary about the Holocaust. And he was originally they were going to show it to the Germans. And they chose that it was too gory and too intense for a post-war country that they actually pulled it, and it ended up going into the British Museum. So both gentlemen did a lot for World War II, which I thought was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I'll shut up now, Kyle.
But I'm a big Hitchcock fan. Rope is, a very good example of his filmmaking. It's a very forward-thinking film, and it's one of the earliest examples I can remember of these long takes, or what you call one-shots or whatever, which would have been exhausting and difficult at this time. Not to say that they're not, and I mean, they've obviously become a staple of modern filmmaking, and people are one-upping each other, making these films now with incredible one-shots, sometimes with the aid of CGI and things. But Rope is a great filmmaking feat to create a set that way, to have all these moving parts, to have to do so much rehearsal, to have to nail these long takes and maintain sometimes very emotional scenes, or scenes that change tone quite a bit or change rooms, things like that. Very difficult, very much like a play, feels like a play the way it's shot. Can definitely see how it was adapted from a play, and is a play I would love to see. But I think the achievement and the way they shot it, there is a part of me that wonders, could you have gotten a better movie out of this if you weren't constrained by that? So it's amazing to show that you can do this. And I understand the idea of shooting it like a play. And I think it works because it builds and it's tense, and you have all these characters basically on one set. So it doesn't feel artificially done. It's kind of like a bottle episode or whatever you call it, where everything takes place in one set. But is the story better told if you do it differently? And I can't answer that question, but sometimes I wonder if, I guess there's not a lot to the story that would really need to be taken out of that set, but I don't know. I just don't know. Sometimes I feel like Rope has a lot of promise and is a great achievement in directing, but doesn't quite get all the way there. In Cold Blood, the directing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, but also, again, I think looking at things through today's mind's eye too, because think of it in the 40s where no one had ever done this. He was making this technology up. Is it that he was playing around and building an experimental thing that he could have shot it that way, but he was doing this because, like,
yeah,
I don't know.
And I think that part of that is separating the importance of the movie for its achievement versus the importance of the movie for its narrative or
sure.
Is it a top 10, top 100 film of all time? Well, if you talk about achievement in filmmaking and advancing a filmmaking art, doing something incredibly difficult at a time when the technology was very limited, or doing something no one had ever done before, you can absolutely make that argument that it belongs among the best of the best for that. But will it be remembered as one of the greatest stories ever told, or one of the greatest performances ever given? That's another story. So it's hard for me sometimes to separate the amazing achievement it was versus is it a fulfilling and the best film it could be.
That's fair.
Some of the times my concerns have been about the beginning and that giving away too much, and also if you're so tied to this, could you have taken more time to get better coverage, different shot, different blocking, different performances, more nuanced performances, more reaction shots, etc., that could have made the movie slightly better if you had all that stuff. You can't do that because you're limited to the medium you're doing. I'll just really quickly touch on In Cold Blood. I don't want to take up too much time. I love the intersplicing of the cop story and the criminal story. I thought that really helped the movie feel like a cat and mouse game. I thought it was really interesting. It's kind of similar in the way of Rope, where that the cops have the evidence. All they need to do is find the killers. So you're aware that they could hang for this. They have enough. And it's just a matter of them getting lucky and grabbing them at the time. Very interesting stuff, and I really love that. I love the black and white feel of it. I think it's really well done. Again, we talked about a lot of the naturalistic acting the director got out of these guys in very extraordinary circumstances. They move a lot through time and space, different countries here and there. Do a great job of following that, so you're never really confused. So I would say it's an excellent directing job.
All right, I got 2 minutes left. Gabe, do you want to take a minute and I'll take a minute?
Sure. I just wanted to I think we talk about cinematography in this category.
Oh, no, shit. If you're going to do that, I want to go first. God
okay, go.
Conrad Hall.
Talk about the great...
Conrad Hall, one of the great, best cinematographers of all time. Excellent work on here. And, of course, then he's the father of cinematographer Conrad Hall. And they're both fantastic. His son went on and he did American Beauty. Conrad, he did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He has between the two of them, they have some of the most beautifully shot movies outside of Roger Deakins out there. But okay, there, go ahead. That's it.
Thank you, Tom, for saying that.
Yes, I was going to mention how beautiful the black and white cinematography was in Cold Blood. I was stunned at how beautiful that film was. And especially, some of these things that I find challenging, like low light cinematography. They're going around the house, gathering up the family and that kind of thing. And it's mostly dark, but you can still see what's happening, and it's just beautiful black and white cinematography in Cold Blood. And of course, I think the elephant in the room is the long take, the long takes for Rope. But I think one other thing we need to mention is that it's the first time that Alfred Hitchcock shot in color, and it was quite a cumbersome process, from what I understand. It required actually, I think, if I remember this correctly, three strips of film that they would actually kind of like combine these to create the color. And so not only was he going through the technical process of coordinating these long takes and choreographing this whole thing. But he was also introducing new technology that he wasn't used to working with. And so I think that's a really tremendous feat to pull all of that stuff off at one time. And I think it also might explain a little bit of how the acting was. We talked about how the actors felt ignored, but they had to be highly choreographed. They had to hit these marks at very certain times. And so maybe that took some of the naturalness out of the acting as well. But it's really just a brilliant, directorial moment in film history. So.
Gabe, I do have one question to ask you. So you talk about time of film and
like the length.
Running. Yep. And
yeah.
So how did you feel about these two?
Well, strangely, I think I mentioned it earlier. Strangely, I felt like Rope might have actually been too short, but.
Right.
But and things had to happen really quickly. I felt like Jimmy Stewart's character caught on to the plot a little too quickly without a lot of like clues and that kind of thing. He kind of caught on kind of quickly, but they kind of had to. And I feel like Kyle mentioned, it may have been a result of the technique that they were trying to go for. You don't want to try to make a 2-hour movie with this much effort. So let's keep it tight. Let's keep it short. So it probably makes sense that it was short. And I think, I didn't hate that, but strangely for me, I thought, oh, this is pretty quick. I think it's an hour and 20 minutes or something. It is
hour and 20.
Yeah. And, I felt at times that maybe In Cold Blood was a little bit long. That there were parts that we could have probably trimmed a little bit, but I didn't have too much of a trouble with it being just over 2 hours.
I was gonna say it's over 2 hours, and so that's why I was curious.
Yeah. No, I thought it was beautiful. It was interesting. It was engaging, and I didn't feel like 2 hours felt too long.
All right.
Film is more sensitive to light.
Let's put it to
this
a
is
vote.
true.
Andrew.
I'm going to go for Sir Hitchcock with Rope. Sorry.
Gabe.
Yeah, I don't know how you can vote against Alfred Hitchcock with that amazing achievement. So Rope for me.
Kyle.
Oh, I hate to be a parrot, but give me Hitchcock.
And Tom.
I'm Hitchcock. He definitely deserves it, but I can't ignore Hall's cinematography in A Cold Blood. So I'm not giving it to the director. I'm giving it to the cinematographer.
It's beautiful.
It completely surprised me. I was not expecting such a beautiful murder movie.
Me neither.
They should have put that on the poster. Such a beautiful murder movie.
Such a beautiful movie. I like it. That's a great tagline.
To get the authenticity he wanted, Richard Brooks filmed In Cold Blood in all the actual locations, including the Clutter House, where the murders took place, and the actual courtroom. 6 of the actual jurors were used. Even Nancy Clutter's horse, Babe, was used in a few scenes. The actual Kansas State Penitentiary facilities and gallows were not used in the film. Scott Wilson clarified in a 2017 media interview that the prison scenes of the film were shot in Colorado and the hanging scene on a Columbia soundstage. Like, how eerie would that be, being back in the original, some of those original spots?
So close to our home.
And also I think it would just
home.
Right, and I think it would give you even more to work with as an actor, right?
Yeah.
It's in Kansas, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a spitting distance.
Well, it's funny whenever I hear that Iowa in movies. They talked about them going to Iowa, and it's always funny to me to hear that because you don't hear it a lot in movies.
Unless you want to get Munson out in the middle of Iowa. Rope was filmed entirely in studio, of course, except for the opening credits. The clouds that you see out the window are made out of fiberglass. For the effect of a police siren coming toward the apartment building at the end, Sir Alfred Hitchcock had an ambulance come at full speed from several blocks away, straight to the Warner Brothers studio. Siren blaring all the way. The sounds were picked up by a microphone suspended from the studio gate.
Very.
And the clouds change 8 times throughout the movie.
Oh, do they?
Yep. They change their shape 8 times throughout the entire movie to show passage of time.
All right. Let's move on to our fourth and final round overall.
Yeah, I have to say, speaking of that opening shot in Rope, that's a very classic Hitchcock angle to me. It's a very steep angle, and the composition of that shot, and it's a really simple, kind of almost throwaway shot of the street, but it just in its own way is very striking. I also think of the shots in North by Northwest of the road where he's waiting for the bus or whatever, and just some of those angles, the choice of those angles is just really fantastic. I think, in this category, we need to talk about music a little bit, because we often do, and I often bring it up. I thought I have mixed feelings about the score for In Cold Blood. It was kind of this jazz funk kind of score written by Quincy Jones, and it's one of those things. And I think it's hard. I don't know how filmmakers would ever escape it, but it's one of those things that kind of ages a film or sets it in a particular time period. Because that music was, it seemed like this music is from this time period, and now that I'm hearing it, it kind of puts it in that time period, which can be good or bad, I guess. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting. But one of the other interesting things about In Cold Blood is when they used the music and when they chose not to. There were several scenes, especially intense scenes, where there really wasn't any music, and it's the kind of thing that I think modern filmmakers would be like, we want some tense music here, something to heighten the feeling of this. But at times it was almost dead silent, and it was just the sounds of what was happening, especially near the end when they were actually committing the crimes. And I found that very interesting, and I found those choices actually very fitting. I felt like that actually raised the tension for me, is that it's completely silent, and all we can hear is, the action that's happening in, for this crime. And so I didn't hate the music. I kind of liked the music. It was kind of fun, but it also kind of, in a way, stuck it in a certain time period. Frankly, I'm not sure if I remember the music in Rope much. Was there? I don't feel like there was a lot of music in Rope. Do you guys remember?
I don't. Other than him playing the piano, nothing stands out.
Right.
And the opening credits.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there was music under the credits, and I find that interesting too in the older movies, how they do all the credits up front and that kind of thing. Yes. They kind of force you to watch them. It's like,
that's because it was a rule.
And how short some of
it was a rule.
Yeah, and nowadays it's like, well, they save most of the credits. They do. There's obviously credits at the beginning of movies now too, but it's not quite the same. They don't go through everybody. They go through key players.
Right.
You mean the 6 minutes of company logos that help make the movie in some way, shape, or other?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Where all the financing came from.
Plus, they don't want to show the 500 visual effects artists that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but I found that interesting in both, and I found the ending of In Cold Blood to be quite abrupt. Although I think it was appropriate, it was kind of strange, that it just kind of ended. That was it. There were no credits or music or anything after that. It just, poof.
With the heartbeat.
It kind of represented what happened to him. It just,
because they had his heartbeat going.
Did they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it went thump, 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 and then when it went to black, it was one last beat, and that was it.
Yeah, I found that rather abrupt, but I also found it very appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah. It made sense. But yeah, I don't think there was a lot of music in Rope either, and I think Hitchcock in some ways is known for some very famous themes. I mentioned North by Northwest, Que Sera Sera. From what was that? Was that The Man Who Knew Too Much, or which one was that? Where, that's a famous song, and I was surprised to find that it was from an Alfred Hitchcock movie. And so I think he's known for famous music, but I think again it was maybe appropriate for something like this that not to have a lot of music, because it was really more about the interactions between the people and the tension created in this situation. It was about the dialogue and the interactions between these people. So,
but oh, go ahead.
No, I just was going to say I thought it was appropriate.
Well, and I would say that I would believe that's true with Hitchcock using popular music, but most of his music is normally over the credits, opening and ending, because he does a lot of storytelling without any music, or it's actually Dianetic sound, where it's actually music or sound coming from the actual movie that can be heard by the audience.
Would you call that psycho sound? Does that count as music?
Is that music?
I don't know.
I'm
asking.
It's like a sound sting.
Yes.
I think Bernard Herrmann said it's music.
Okay. Well, then
who said it's music?
He wrote it. Bernard Herrmann, he wrote it, so he gets to say.
Yeah,
okay.
That's fair. So the opening shot, being high, being the traditional, would you say that give you a little bit of vertigo?
Maybe.
Come on, that one was good.
That's two.
Good.
That's two.
One more, and we got to throw you off.
I usually get those.
I think I don't know what maybe it's just me, but it seems like the Hitchcock movies kind of like ebb and flow. So when I was in film school, it was Psycho. Psycho was the pinnacle, and then after that, it seemed like Vertigo kind of became like, oh no, Vertigo is really his best film. Recently, it seems like Rear Window had picked up a lot of steam. People were really kind of taking it and dissecting. There's a board game out with Rear Window.
Really?
And so Rope was kind of always maybe lower on the Hitchcock list. And so when we decided to do these two, I was kind of like, we're going to watch this Hitchcock movie that's not probably one of his, better films, but, it's still pretty good. And I was really surprised by how much Rope just kind of drew me in. And I thought the story was really compelling, and it relied more on dialogue more than visuals, and Hitchcock tends to rely more on his composition and telling the story through really unique visuals and angles and stuff like that. But Rope does, it seems like the use of real time, but then also I think the use of dialogue is something that he didn't lean on so much, and that was kind of refreshing. And so coming away from it, Rope shot up, and I think I enjoy Rope at this point, this week in my life. I enjoy more than Vertigo. But it's interesting just to see how those movies kind of wax and wane in terms of the popularity. So I thought In Cold Blood was very beautiful, and it was a really great movie. I don't know if I'll watch it again. Like I said, I'm not one for true crime stories. It's not anything I'm particularly interested in. And aside from the cinematography, there wasn't a whole lot that draw me back to it. But it was a great film. I'm glad we did it, and I'm glad I got exposed to it. But yeah, so now you know where I'm voting.
I have to agree with you, and to your point about the Hitchcock movies that surface and go, Dial M for Murder was one big one for us. People were always like, "Oh, Dial M for Murder is like his perfect movie." It's like, it is this week. Yeah, I guess that's, I've talked enough about Rope, so I would say I agree. In Cold Blood is one of those. It was very beautiful to watch. It was interesting to see again. It's been many long years since I've seen it. Previously in high school, and it definitely hits different. I look at things differently, obviously, than I did then. It was heavy then, and it's heavy now, and it's one of those. It's like, yeah, it's a crime drama. I'm with you though, Tom. I don't. This is the only reason I watched it again was because we were doing it. Because when this came up as a bout, I was like, oh, okay, I kind of remember this. And so I like watching movies that, that make you think and let you have fun and stuff. And this one was, I don't know. It's one of those, I'm just like, I don't know if I'd be drawn toward it again either. Yeah, I guess maybe you know where I'm voting then.
Yeah. So Rope is one of those movies I don't want to say it rests on its achievement because it's a good movie, but it's an important movie for people who are interested in film to see. And it is an achievement to marvel at. It is old-fashioned and old-timey and will be viewed that way backwards through this lens, but I think it has a lot of things that maybe we didn't talk about enough that are excellent. The matte paintings outside the windows that change are really well done and look great. I thought the setting was great. It took a lot of guts by Hitchcock to have one of his long takes basically be behind all of the principal actors' backs while the maid cleans off the chest. That is such an interesting way to build tension and something I've never seen before. And you're leaving all of your main actors delivering dialogue off of screen. So he really had a lot of faith in his ability to tell stories in unconventional ways. And I think for a good reason. And it served him well over his career. What an honor. I mean, what higher compliment can you pay a director in that people are still arguing which of his great films is the greatest years and years after his death, and that's, something we'll be doing with modern directors someday. In Cold Blood really surprised me. I was not expecting to like it so much. I think if it would not have had the cat and mouse, cops and killers sort of 50-50 in the movie or 60-40, I wouldn't have liked it as much as just a character study of these two people. I didn't think it was as interesting, but I loved the procedural, the on the track, the figuring it out. I thought it did a great job moving all over in time and space without getting us lost. You can miss me with that jazz music. It's just not my thing. Probably just a product of the 60s. Cinematography in both these movies is excellent. Tom mentioned, especially in Cold Blood, the black and whites, to get them so vivid. The lighting is great. I mean, it's a real work of art to do that with such precision and skills. So that's great. I think these are two really good movies. Are they like top 100, top 50 movies of all time? Probably not for me. But I think as far as like technical achievements and in some cases performances delivered by some people or chances taken by directors or work by cinematographers, they stand out among the crowd for some of their properties. So I think they're well worth watching. Will I watch them again? Rope is one of those movies I feel like you can be super pretentious and tell people like, watch this movie, know how old it is. And they did these all in one takes, but it is still really impressive. And I caught a lot more of the cuts this time because I'd kind of read about how they hid them. But the first time I watched the movie, and I think for first-time viewers, you can really be dazzled by it. There's a lot of cleverness that you have to know a little bit about filmmaking. But yeah, if you watch it without looking for the cuts, it really flows incredibly well, and is intriguing to watch.
I thought it was funny that my copy that I bought was in ultra high definition from Amazon, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, one thing there's a couple of things I wanted to mention really quick. One thing there were a couple of instances in Rope where you could see like the shadow of a mic or a camera or something like that. There were a couple instances where I'm like, oh, they probably didn't want to do that again, so they left it in. And then I wanted to mention the cars in Cold Blood. Did anybody think those cars were fantastic and that police officers should drive those kinds of cars today?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought they were
100%.
Fantastic. That is like, oh man, that that is so cool, and it's so fun that officers, but officials, policemen are driving these cars. They're so cool. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that really quick because
Do it, Tom.
So there's a story from the set of Rope that they were doing a take, and a cameraman's hand got crushed under the wheels of the dolly, and they had to gag him, drag him out of the studio in the middle of a take because they didn't want to stop the take. So
well, they are expendable.
Us crew guys are pretty expendable.
Yeah, completely replaceable. Just swap them out.
Which is funny with this Munch choreography and practicing and rehearsing and movements and everything that they were constantly doing in the movie.
I will say this: at least they didn't cut it off to be able to keep going. At least they gagged his mouth and then moved him out.
They amputated.
Yes.
Keep going.
I do know some producers that would just say, no, just cut it off. He can keep going.
Yeah.
He's fine.
They should have used that audio during the choking scene.
Yes.
Yeah.
They could have repurposed it.
Why is he saying my fucking hand?
Doesn't make any sense.
The camera crushed my fucking hand. I'm suing you, Alfred. This guy is really weird.
And his mouth doesn't even move. He must be a ventriloquist.
Oh my God. All right. Now we need to make that edit.
Grandpa.
We need to make that edit now.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Let's put it to a vote, fellas. Gabe.
Man, I don't know. I'm going to go with In Cold Blood in this category.
All right. Kyle.
Oh, boy. Better movie. Yeah, the gripe I have with Rope about the beginning is really sticking with me, and I know that's such a personal choice. I'm gonna vote for In Cold Blood.
All right. Tom.
In this day and age when we have movies that are just so damn long, it's refreshing to get a nice complete story shot and taken care of in 80 minutes. So I'm gonna give it to Rope.
All right. And Andrew.
Not really sure. My decision's hanging by a rope to figure out which one.
Okay, you're done. You're out.
That's it. Kick him out. He's out.
Mute his microphone.
He's out.
Going with rope.
The elderly hitchhiker in Cold Blood was played by longtime character actor and extra Raymond Hatton, and was his final role. Hatton made his first movie in 1909 and had 418 known credits to his name. 418 credits. That's amazing.
Is that more than who's the guy that we talked about who was in so many
James Hall?
What's his name? Yeah. Is that more than him?
All right. Well, I'll have to Google.
More trivia.
Yeah. Although Rope lasts 1 hour and 20 minutes and is supposed to be in real time, quote unquote, The time frame it covers is actually longer, a little more than 1 hour and 40 minutes. This is accomplished by speeding up the action. The formal dinner lasts only 20 minutes. The sun sets too quickly, and so on. The September 2002 issue of Scientific American contains a complete analysis of this technique and the effect it has on the viewers who actually feel as if they watched a 1 hour and 40-minute movie.
Okay, as somebody who likes shooting at golden hour, there's no such thing as a sunset that moves too slow. I mean,
that's true. It's
no,
always
that
too fast.
sunset sets as fast as they usually do.
Yep, always.
It gets close and it's just gone.
James Hong, 460 acting credits.
Oh, all right, got him beat.
It's competition.
Yep. Yeah,
also
that was
5
crazy.
writing credits.
Yeah. All right. Well, while I attempt to do some math, let's move on to our recommendations for this month. We'll start with Kyle.
Oh no, I was not prepared for this. All right, let me consult my ye olde big list of movies I saw this year. Okay, so let's stick with which of these do I want to give you? So, okay, I think I'm not going to be the first person to recommend this movie, but I did want to say that I'm going to give it the nod of recommendation because I enjoyed it a lot more than I anticipated.
Smoking
and I
the
like
Bandit.
when movies surprise. It's actually Sharky's Machine. You got the wrong
Burt Reynolds.
Burt Reynolds movie.
All right.
Yeah. But no, I am actually going to recommend a movie that was out and popular for a very long time, but I just saw. That movie is Barbie. I'm going to recommend it because I think it's beautiful, it's fun, it's catchy, it sometimes has a good message and sometimes has a very confusing, muddled message. But I would recommend it just for the set design because I think it's gorgeous. And I think it's a lot of fun. And I never thought I would enjoy a movie about Barbie in my wildest dreams. But here we are with me recommending it. So, yeah, I would recommend Barbie, not just for people who like Barbie, but for people who want to just check out the movie.
It is a very well done movie.
Be surprised.
Well Tom.
So we're recording this 4 days before the Oscars, and I'm wrapping up Oscar Death Race, where you try to watch every movie in short that's nominated. So I have 4 left. But the one I watched last night, I absolutely love. So I'm glad I watched it last night, so I can recommend it. But it's American Fiction with Jeffrey Wright. It's up for, how many Oscars is it up for? 5 Oscars. It is it's a very funny, touching play about a writer who gets kind of fed up with black stereotypes, and to kind of fight back, he writes his own very stereotypical African American novel, full of the stereotypical language and stuff. It kind of as a joke, but then of course it takes off, and he suddenly becomes very self-loathing at his own popularity, and it gets very complicated and twisted, and it's a genuinely funny movie, really well done. I don't know if it's going to win any Oscars. It might have a shot at screenplay, but I would definitely recommend American Fiction. Definitely worth checking out.
All right, Andrew.
Just because I don't get a lot of a category to be able to gush about Hitchcock, I'm going to recommend a Hitchcock film. And it's one that I talked about a little bit, and that is Dial M for Murder. It's a good thriller, good edge of your seat kind of thing. It's a short film. It's similar to what we just watched, only 100 minutes. So it tells a really good story, and it's in the traditional thriller of Hitchcock feel. His shots are pretty traditional. Yeah, it's a great Hitchcock film. So if you haven't seen Dial M for Murder, I highly recommend that one.
All right. Gabe.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to be too terribly creative this month with my recommendation.
Just this
I'm
month?
also, yes, only this month. I know I'm super creative other months, but I'm going to dial it back a little bit for
Okay,
this one.
thank you. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I know I'm kind of edgy most of the time, but I'm also going to recommend a Hitchcock film that I don't think we've recommended before. North by Northwest. It's one of my favorites. It's such a beautiful film, so well acted. The shot choices are amazing. There's action sequences, and there's some kind of fun, kind of punny types of sequences in it that I don't know. It's just really, to me, it's one of my favorite Alfred Hitchcock films. And if you've never seen it, you should watch it. It's extremely enjoyable. A lot of tension, beautiful shots, just well done film.
Yeah, that might be my favorite Hitchcock film too.
Yeah, it's really fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, they're hard to choose from, but that one is one of my favorites.
All right. Well, my recommendation for this month is something you've all heard about, and I know we had a discussion about it before we started rolling, but I am going to recommend you guys go see Lawrence Arabia in Space, also known as Dune Part 2. Gabe, I don't know, I wasn't around to hear if you had seen it or not. You probably want to skip it if you're not into if movie times are bugging you, but I'm gonna go see it. Okay, for me as a fan of the books from a kid and growing up on David Lynch's film, there was always a few scenes from the books that I had in my head that I wanted to see on screen, and the cinematography in the movie is absolutely beautiful. The production design of the film is astounding and amazing. But there's one scene, and everyone's seen it in the trailers, and that's when the three sandworms break through the sandstorm. For me, was worth the wait. Was worth that 2 hours and 46 minutes. I mean, it doesn't happen right at the end, but it was worth waiting for. Denis Villeneuve is a fantastic director, and I think we can all agree to that. This is an epic, and it's beautifully shot, well acted, wonderfully directed, and I highly recommend everyone go see Dune Part 2 in the largest screen you can see it.
And he shot part of it in infrared.
Yes, he did.
Which I think is fantastic.
I think if the Academy needs a case for best fight dance direction, if they want an award for fight choreography, that fight at the end between Willy Wonka and Elvis Presley was definitely
Willy Wonka
and Elvis Presley.
It was
go see Lawrence Arabia in Space.
Elvis
great. And Willy Wonka fight at the end.
But you saw the trailer, so you knew that. But yes, it's.
But I mean, we talked a lot about innovative directors and things. Shooting on infrared that's nobody's done something quite like what he did for this. So
yeah,
was it like IMAX infrared? Was it like
I don't know
format?
I don't know if it was huge format infrared, but it was in an infrared, and it is striking how good it looks.
And it wasn't like they kind of like did normal shots and then they kind of blurred it together. Like it was 100% shot in pure infrared, and so they were, once they got it back, they were figured out. Like it's insane.
Yeah. Absolutely. Also, Thanos is in it. Thanos is in it. He helps out Space Messiah, and also the star of the song "Weapon of Choice" also plays the Emperor in the film, which makes it even better because in that song they talk about walk without rhythm so you don't attract the worm. There you go. If I haven't sold you on this movie yet, then you're dead to me. But keep listening. To the
I'm
show,
all
please.
in. I'm a very big fan of the first one. I thought it was.
Watch the first one.
Yeah, watch the first one so you know what's
to the
going
Oh
on.
yeah, no, I've heard that too. That it's one of those things where it's like you can't necessarily. You don't. I've also heard though, if you haven't read the books or if you're not familiar with the Dune lore, that maybe some of it gets past you. In
some of it, and they also
but maybe it's not
changed.
important.
They changed a few things in this as well, so they could continue on to hopefully the third film.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let's poke the monkey and find out who won.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner by decision is Rope.
This is not where I thought we would be on this. I'm very surprised. I'm not saying you guys are wrong. I'm just surprised. 12-4, Rope.
Yeah, I thought Rope was going to win by more than that.
Really?
No, I don't know. In Cold Blood is not. I don't know. It's not talked as much as it probably used to. So
right. I was just really surprised at how much I liked In Cold Blood.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think all of you said that. It's a very well done film. And I also agree with Kyle that, if you get past the gimmick of it being a one-shot film, does Rope stand a chance as being considered one of his great films? Right? Because there's that whole thing of doing a one-shot before one-shots were actually possible. Mm-hmm. And that's always in the back of my mind with when I watch it.
Certainly argue other than and I would argue other than the act of shooting it that way, Rear Window is a better movie in every other way.
Yes.
Or you could say the same thing about Vertigo or Dial M for Murder or any of his other Psycho, any of his other movies. So yeah, even if you consider Rope like one of Hitchcock's lesser films, it's still really, really good.
Like you guys said, the actors are what, the two main actors, especially, what was his name? Because now I've got both of them going through my head.
Farley Granger and John Dahl.
Yeah, John Dahl was just...
Brandon Shaw.
Yeah, was just fantastic. But I, once again, very, very surprised at how much I enjoyed In Cold Blood. All right, let's put a pin in this one. Please leave us a review on whatever podcasting service you use. It helps us reach new listeners. If you like us, tell your friends. If you hate us, tell your enemies. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. If you want to listen to an unedited version of the show, you can catch us live on Twitch whenever we record an episode. In April, we will be taking over the airwaves, and Gabe takes over hosting duties as Pump Up the Volume takes on Good Morning Vietnam. For Kyle, Gabe, Andrew, Tom, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
So I just wanted to say I saw a picture of Austin Butler in a thumbnail for an interview about Dune 2, and he really, when he smiles, he just looks like a hotter Napoleon Dynamite. It's crazy how much he looks like John Hader.
Where's this salsa made? It's made in New York City. Get a rope.
Get a rope.
Get a rope. You can believe we let that on the TV. They were going to hang that man for where his salsa was made. He didn't make the salsa, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, but he
Calm
bought
down.
it.
He brought it.
But he brought
He
it.
brought it.
What if he didn't know it was made in New York City? Would you still hang him?
It's on the label, man. Just
Yeah.
fucking read labels at the store.
Do you look at where all your food's made?
My salsa, I do.
Yeah.
Oh, because you don't want to get hung. I get it.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.
It can get lonely climbing Mount McKinley, so to entertain myself, I go to ChumbaCasino.com. At Chumba Casino, I can play hundreds of online casino-style games for free, like online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Plus, I get a daily login bonus. It's just too bad that up here, I don't have anyone to share my excitement with. Woohoo!
Live the Chumba life. Anytime, anywhere. Play for free now at ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.